little bit before we start with our first speaker. So if you just joined in, welcome. We have a packed event, so I suppose we're going to start. First a talk from Will about writer struggles, then we'll do the Fortelling 5.0, first a trailer, then a live demo, and then we'll do the synopsis review of what everyone has been submitting thus far. Nice. I think it's time to welcome Will to the stage. All right. Hi, welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Everybody hear me?
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here with us. Maybe just a quick introduction from your side. You're a member of our Discord community. Can you hear me?
I am. Yep.
Ah, yeah, exactly. And you are one of the moderators that help us out. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself? What are you working on? Yeah.
Okay. I will give it a go. So I'm Will Irvine. Not my real name, my pen name. I am a writer, blogger, creative consultant, content creator, editor, community moderator, whatever you want me to be, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you wanted me to talk about writing struggles, so let's do that. So, what is the struggle, or what was my experience of the struggles, and how did I overcome them? So if we can go into the next slide, I can go through some of those. So I've got suspected ADHD. It's not diagnosed yet. I'm on a waiting list. But it's very clear to me that my brain is a little bit all over the place. Super creative, find it really, really hard to focus on things. And when it comes to writing a story, it was quite difficult for me at first to kind of focus on what the story needed and to find time to write. And I had sort of ideas everywhere, too many ideas, not enough time, really, really big struggle. So yeah, that was a really big challenge for me, and still is sometimes, but there are things that I've put in place to help with that, and Fortelling has certainly helped with that, and I'll move on to that in one of the next slides. But there was also lack of self-confidence. I really struggled with self-confidence. Yeah, there we go. So no self-confidence. Really always struggled with self-confidence when I was growing up and into my adult years as well. I have a tendency to babble. I don't know if anybody's noticed on Discord, like writing really long messages and things. My friends know me affectionately as Captain S. It's a running joke. But I sometimes take that negative because my neurodivergent brain just wants to get lots of information out there. And I feel like info dumping is a good way of doing that. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but info dumping is kind of a thing that we do. So that's where Captain SA comes from. And I feared that no one would want to read a story written by me due to my own like sort of perception of how others perceive me. I always thought of Captain SNE was like a negative thing. People were doing it as like almost like a bullying thing, but not really bullying. So then that led to imposter syndrome, and when I met my wife, we became fast friends before we fell in love and all of that stuff. That's a whole story in and of itself. She was a writer. She was an author. She'd been working on her book for 20 odd years before she published it. So that was like a really big deal to me. And I was meeting so many people who were more experienced than me and who knew what they were doing. So I felt a lot of imposter syndrome, and even more so when I joined our local authors group. Lots and lots of people would publishing themselves and getting loads of books out there and really knowing how to write. I was stepping in there halfway through my life thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I should know what I'm doing. I feel like I should know more than this. So yeah, no self-confidence at all. And then I also had no idea how to start. Everyone says, you watch all the YouTube videos and all the online advices, just write the thing. just write, just sit down and write. For a brain like mine, you can't just sit down and write. There's lots of steps to take. So I really didn't know how to start and how to like actually get myself to doing that. Then comparison. I don't know if everybody knows this saying. Comparison is the thief of joy. It's a well-known thing, and it's true. I would spend my time comparing myself to everybody in these authors groups and in these book fairs that I was supporting my wife in going to, and thinking I really should be better than this. I should be at a different stage. So yeah, and then when I did finally get around to writing, I began writing in Word, and all of my ideas, character profiles, notes, world building, etc., all became very cluttered very quickly, and it was all over the place. So I needed something that would help. So for me, going to the writers groups and then subsequently meeting some of those authors from the group in a social sort of aspect, in a social manner, that helped me to sort of get into that mindset in a routine way, sort of weekly and bi-weekly. That allowed me sort of those few hours on a Tuesday to sit there and think about my book and think about where does it need to go? What am I struggling with? How can these people help me? And just talking through sometimes really helps to kind of get the juices flowing, I guess, so to speak. So that helps with the too many ideas and not enough time, is to sort of give yourself that window to kind of breathe and let the brain kind of get the juices going and flowing. The self-confidence thing, as I've mentioned, joining the authors group made a massive difference. Having the support and encouragement from these people who I was so intimidated by at first. It turns out they're just like-minded people, like you and I, like everyone in the Discord. Just the same people on the same journey, just at different points in the journey. The best place to be, but places like that can be helpful because you can see some people giving advice on a daily basis, on a regular basis, and you can pick and choose from that advice as to what's the good stuff and what's the bad stuff. It becomes quite clear very early on what's the good advice and what's the bad advice. So just don't take the bad advice and listen to the good advice. Figure out what works for you from that advice and put that into practice. Do your research on not just the things that you struggle with in writing your narratives, but in how to write. There's plenty of stuff out there. I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this or not, but there is the intention of Fortelling potentially offering some more guidance and advice on that through the blog. So maybe look out for that in the future. And then in terms of cluttered content, which is my other struggle.
Okay, I'm Mariana. I'm a Brazilian author, but I also work in book publishing as a publishing assistant and a marketing manager for a small publishing house here in Brazil. So I have a little experience in the area of creative writing. I think that's about it. I'm excited to work with you guys in the synopsis, and let's go.
So first, let's start out with the differences, right? So let's start out what synopsis truly is. So a synopsis is actually a short summary of the whole story in a book or from a script, and what it really needs to contain, because there's a lot of different ways to do it, but it really needs to contain the main characters, the central conflict, and the key plot points, and how everything then resolves from start to finish, which is in stark contrast of the blurb that we'll talk about in a bit. So for this synopsis, what you do is you try to show the agents and the editors the structure of the story, and you try to keep it between 500 and 1,500 words, where you do include the spoilers. And that maybe sounds a little bit confusing at first, especially when we first received a lot of blurbs, which is the back side of the book. You do include spoilers in the synopsis because it's really you showing those agents and editors what your story is truly about. And then you you have to keep in mind who you're writing for, which are the publishers, the literary agents, and the editors. So then that's in contrast with the blurb, which is actually a short description for the people, for the people who want to buy your book. So that's really trying to intrigue them. If you could go to the next slide really quickly, is that you want to hook the reader's curiosity, and it's actually rather short in comparison, so around 100 to 200 words, where you do not spoil the book, of course, because you're trying to hook them and trying to get them very curious on picking up the book. Yeah, so that's a really short overview. And then I hand over the word again back to Will.
Before we get into sort of reviewing the synopses and the blurbs that have been submitted, and even the cover art that some people have submitted, I thought it might be useful to talk about how to craft a synopsis. And for me, what I've been doing, and I know some other people use this as well, use this technique as well, is I've used the blurb to craft the synopsis. Okay, so that's my mocked up cover art for the novel I'm working on, and this is my blurb. So it's 142 words. So I'll just quickly read through. Let me get this slide up on my side. Here it is. So it says, in a dystopian near future where society has collapsed due to an attack on democracy, an autocratic government has arisen through the abuse of a ubiquitous technology known as the Nora implant. The inventor of the implant, Raymond Maynard, simply wanted a way to preserve human memories and suppress cognitive decline. But now civilians are under direct influence and control. He and his wife Alexis, their daughter Eleonora, and youngest Ethan must journey across the country, learning who they can and cannot trust on their mission to take back the tech, place control in the right hands, give power back to the people, and topple the tyrant behind the fall of society. Witness the fallout of a new kind of war and ask questions about the perils of relying too much on technology and abusing power and privacy in the modern world. So that is a short blurb that you would put on the back of the book. It gives you 3 to 4 paragraphs of the general gist of what to expect. And I've kept it under 150 words, which will fit nicely onto a hefty sized novel like mine would be. So if we go to the next slide, please. Then I've written a lot of words, so bear with me. How to craft the synopsis. I'm going to go through each bullet point and sort of expand a little bit as needed. I will try and be as quick as possible. So first of all, the way I would do it is expand upon the blurb. So I would write the blurb first, and then I would expand upon that and add more detail to the existing text. I'd use the outlines and timelines features in Fortelling as you write, and lift from those to have a ready-made summary of events. So I then check the word count after lifting from the outlines and timelines, and link the copied text together using bridging sentences and paragraphs, and expand on the copied text where needed. So that would just get you started with the synopsis. That would give you like the basic framework to start with. Then you would condense it if longer than 1,000 words. Some agents and editors might accept up to 1,500 words, but the target should be around a max of 1,000. So you've got to be clear, concise, and to the point as much as possible. Carefully select which sentences serve the purpose of summarizing the events and which are sort of filler stuff. You've got to eliminate all of the filler text. So any sentences that don't really drive the summarized narrative forward, you got to get rid of. Then you move on to making sure that you are explaining, you move on to introducing your main character, make sure that that's there, introducing their goals and the inciting incidents that begin the story. So that's like obviously crucial. Hopefully that doesn't need explaining. Then you go on to explain what prompts the main character to act. Obviously, go on their journey, embark on their quest, whatever it is that they do, and talk about what they stand to lose. Keep your characters to the main characters. You got to skip the secondary characters, your background characters, and all your subplots. Those are obviously for the story itself. You make sure you map out the main story points. So all the important beats show how the tension rises as the story progresses and include any turning points and plot twists. Then you end with your climax and explain how things get resolved in the final pages of the book or how they don't in some cases. So moving on to the right side, you've got to ensure your main story arc is fully summarized. Like I've said, just reviewing or summarizing again what was on the left there. Include your key character arcs, your twists, your reveals, a clear beginning, middle, and end to the structure. You've got to write the synopsis in the third person and present tense. This is what tends to work. Even if the story isn't written in the same way, third person present tense helps your editors, your agents, whoever, to read and visualize themselves in the story as it unfolds for them throughout the summary. You then focus your summary on cause and effect. So because of X, protagonist chooses Y. So if there's an inciting incident, your protagonist chooses this. This then happens, your protagonist does this. So cause and effect. Something happens, the protagonist, the main character, or other characters react to it and do something. You stick to character-driven text rather than elaborate prose, text walls, which I'm guilty of, as you can see, or long dialogue exchanges. No, in this chapter, or as we reach the exciting climax, it's not like the narrative of a comic book, for example. Like, you don't want to go too meta with it. You want to keep it grounded in the character, in the characters, and how the story is driven forward by their experiences. If your synopsis is then longer than a couple of pages in like a Word doc or whatever, it's probably too long. So like 2 to 3 max. Useful thing in those document editors and in Fortelling is that you can make use of word counters. So use those. Be ruthless then in your editing of the synopsis, and this will also help you get comfortable with being ruthless when it comes to editing your full manuscript. So when you are reading through your summary, you really need to be brutal with your sentences. If there's something in there that doesn't move things forward and isn't important to a plot point or a story beat or whatever, it needs to be gone. And eventually what you're left with, hopefully, is a short enough summary that explains the entire story from beginning to middle to end, with all of the important bits, key character developments, and then hopefully that will then impress your editors or your agents. So yeah, that's how we craft a synopsis, and how I would do it using a blurb.
So this is a template I created for you guys, so you can send publishing houses and agencies your work. It's called a book proposal, and it's easier for us in the publishing industry to have these type of slides to look at before actually reading your manuscript. So this is why the synopsis is one of the most important things you need to work on if you want a traditional publishing deal. And this helps us understand a little more, uh, besides the synopsis, what's your book about. So, the first thing you're going to want to do in a book proposal is introduce yourself, your career, your writing style, what do you like to write, and everything you think it's important to the publishing house to know about you and your books. After that, you can introduce us to your book with the synopsis that Will has talked about how to build a good synopsis. But here is the important part. It's nice for the publishing house to understand tropes, genres, keywords, maximum word count you think this project will be at, as well as the status of your project, if it's still in writing, if the first draft is already finished. And if you want to maximize your chances at getting inside a publishing house or literary agency, it's nice if you can add similar books you think fit the type of book you are pitching. So if you're sending to a publishing house, it's cool if you try to pick from their catalog another books that fit right with yours. So in a bookshelf, would they be near each other? It's good for us to see if your book actually fits in our catalog. So the public is also something you want to add in this slide. So uh, what uh, what who are you writing for? Is it a young adults? Are these mature? Are there mature teens here? So every tiny detail you can tell us about your book helps us to select the most similar to the projects we are looking for here. And after that, don't forget to add your socials, your contact number, your contact email, and everything besides that. We, in the publishing house I work in Brazil, which is not one of the biggest ones, but has a medium size, I'd say, we receive at least 20 book proposals per week. And there is no way we can read every excerpt that we receive. So this helps us select the best ones. So through your synopsis, mostly, we can feel a bit of your writing and your writing style. So be sure to work on that. And as Will said, be ruthless with your editing in it, because it can be the entry door to a publishing deal.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, this is really an interesting and different perspective, I think. And that's also for what a lot of authors are insecure about, is about reaching out. And Mariana, at what kind of stage do you send out these book proposals? Because I can imagine that a lot of authors are maybe struggling with.
You can send a sample of your book with the book proposal. So before reading the sample, I will read the book proposal. But if a literary agent, for example, asks you to read your work and your future projects, that's what you send. And you don't need to send only one project in these slides. You can show all of your cards here and let him understand better how you work and your workflow. And if a publishing house contacts you directly asking, so what do you have for us? Maybe you don't have anything ready, but you have your ideas. So this is a great way to show them and present them and manage a book deal without having actually a manuscript ready. That's what actually happened to me. I have a book called When the Stars Fall, and translating to English, that the editors contacted me. I didn't have anything ready, but I had my ideas, sent out a publishing book proposal, and they picked one of, I think, 5 ideas. So I wrote that, and now it is in every library and bookstore in Brazil. So try to make a book proposal as soon as you can, because it helps a lot.
Congratulations, that's really, really amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of this. And I think now it's time to jump in, right, into the synopsises we've received. I think the best.
I think just one thing I want to note before we do move on.
Oh yeah, of course.
When you are contacted by agents or publishing houses or whatever, always check to make sure they're legit, because there are so many scams out there, and there are so many people who contact you with like a Gmail address or whatever. So always double check the domain that they come from, and always check that they are actually legitimate. Otherwise, you're giving away your idea to somebody who isn't legit, um, who isn't genuine, who doesn't have your interests at heart. And if they're asking for you to pay to publish, don't do it. Just step away. Always step away. Like, yes, there are hybrids that will ask you to pay some and they will help you get published, but for the most part, don't do it. Just step away. Publishing should always be free to the writer. So yeah, that's just the last thing I touch on there.
Prepared this one, right, Will?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay, so this one is from one of our Discord members who's very active. So I hope I don't come across too brutal with this. I don't mean to be mean, but I'm hopefully giving you constructive criticism and constructive information. So this one is called Quantum Essence. Has been submitted. It's a dystopian fantasy, currently in the development phase, and the synopsis that was submitted, which may or may not be a synopsis, it may be a blurb, I don't know, but it was submitted as a synopsis, so we're reading it as that. It goes as, oftentimes, great minds tend to discuss the philosophical question, what is life about? Well, rather than struggling with this notion, wouldn't it be much more entertaining to realize personally impactful understanding? Is there an essence to us? What is the essence of this race? That guy, that girl, that phenomenon? Upon the advent of the apocalypse, in which answering these questions became the only means to distinguish and empower oneself to survive, everyone ultimately aims to approach the existential quantum essence. Therefore, important questions need to be asked. What is quantum essence? What does quantum essence embody? How to approach quantum essence? And that's kind of how that goes. So, 3 key takeaways from this, which I'll dive into in the next slide, is that it's missing vital information. If we base it on sort of how to craft a synopsis that we talked about before, we think this is a blurb, yeah. So it reads as a blurb rather than synopsis. It asks too many questions and there's not enough structure. So let's go through this review. Let me bring this up on my side for a moment. Which slide is this? It is this one. Okay. So the review. This sounds more like a blurb for the back of a book than a full synopsis, and is missing vital plot details like characters, spoilers, twists, and a clear beginning, middle, and end. It gives the impression of a philosophical non-fiction book rather than a fantasy story. And even if it is a blurb rather than a synopsis, it asks far too many questions all at once without giving important information to the reader, and is sort of missing the clear hook to draw them in. So I think the questions were supposed to be the hook, but it's not really landing without further information, I think. I feel that instead it acts as more of a thought-provoking prompt for people to go away with and think about, rather than pick up and read. And it also, in one part of it, it jumps between past and present tense, and should probably just stick to one, but that's like a minor thing. That's you go over that with an editor or whatever, or in the editing phase. So suggestions for this: expand upon the advent of the apocalypse. What was that? What was the inciting event? That's the inciting event we're talking about that gets the characters to start on their journey. Elaborate on why people are seeking quantum essence, and maybe define it in a way that the reader in the bookshop can understand before they buy it. Like if they pick it up off the shelf, maybe define what quantum essence is in a loose sense so that they have some curiosity about it. Otherwise, it's just what do these words mean? So touch on it and how it empowers them to survive, how it empowers the characters to survive. Maybe bring in some of the characters in order to do that. Answer at least 1 or 2 of the questions posed within the blurb / synopsis, and give readers something to intrigue them into wanting to know more. And if it is a synopsis, give a clear beginning, middle, and end, which obviously I've touched on. Define the spoilers, the twists, the characters, the vital plot details, and as I've said in my sort of guide earlier, lift from the timeline to help summarize the story. So hopefully that's helpful. And then I will go on to quickly touch on the cover art, because we like to look at the cover art and give our feedback on that as well. So in the last slide for this section, I love you probably can't see it in the stream, but I love the sky background of the stars and the clouds. That said though, overall, it's a bit too busy. There's too much going on there. I would say that we don't need the green floral frame around it or the earth icon. I think we need the book title larger, more prominent, maybe not italicized. I would recommend using, from a design perspective, I would recommend using a more solid font and probably a tall and thin font that would fit sort of the dystopian and fantasy genres a bit better. I'm unsure what the elemental icons are and what they're representing, but perhaps that could be incorporated into like a different background image if you wanted to go a different way with it. Clearly, this is a web novel rather than a physical book necessarily, but the web novel graphic, etc., doesn't really need to be there. It's not really needed. Only the author name is needed. So the cover art really should be a bit more simple, clean, easy to convey the imagery that gives a sense of what the book may be about. And I think the night sky image, for me personally, the night sky image may be a good representation of that existential and philosophical thinking, if that's kind of where you're going with it. So yeah, that would just be my feedback on that. I think it's a good base idea, but I think we need to maybe tone the noise down a bit, clean it up, and give it a bit more direction. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see that Coffee Break, the author of this book, is also on the Discord channel, and he thanked you for all the amazing feedback and that it was so detailed.
Hopefully it's not too critical.
No, I'm sure not. I can only imagine that this is really useful and something to start iterating on, because, well, everything in the writing process is of course an iterative process, and you finding out
exactly.
It's an iterative process.
It's an iterative thing. It's a good first draft to kind of get an idea. It just needs a bit cleaning up. Yeah. The idea is there. And with the submission that was a synopsis, if it is a blurb, it doesn't need that much to turn it into something a bit more refined. If it's a synopsis, then it does need a little bit more, but it's not bad by any means. Like, the ideas are there, you just need to expand on it a bit more.
Yep, exactly.
So
the next one.
Are we moving on to the next one? Yes.
By the way, okay. Mariana, if you have anything, because you've reviewed those as well.
Yes, do jump in with your comments.
Exactly. Yeah.
I believe the intent of all these questions was to leave the reader curious, but in order to be curious, we need to understand what we're reading and what to expect from that story. Since it's missing vital points, the introduction of the story itself and the plotline, there is no curiosity regarding the story. The questions are thought-provoking, yes, but if you want a reader to be interested in your story, these universal questions don't actually do the job. You have to introduce us to the difference. What is this book about? Who is the boy? Who is the girl? And it does look like a very nice book with interesting plot lines that we don't know. So instead of reaching for readers, it pushes them away a little bit. And that's what I wanted to add, because I agree with everything Will said.
This one is another dystopian one. Claims that they've finished with the first draft and they're now into editing, which is fantastic. Really excited to read that one because obviously I'm writing dystopian stuff, so reading it would be fun. So the blurb, though, I feel like needs a little bit of work, but it has a very strong opening and closing. So let's read through it and then we'll give the feedback. So it says, it's been 50 years since the 7 continents united and became the 7 empires. Now, with a great war about to rage across the globe, 5 spies have been sent from Potentia, originally North America, to stop the war. However, the spies are captured by enemy troops and taken to a secret base up north. The spies manage to escape, but get lost in a massive lab. They don't have much time before they're caught. With unexpected friends, heartbreak, and betrayal, will all 5 of the spies make it home alive? So, moving on to the next slide, I feel like this is a pretty good one. From the start point and the end point, it just needs a little bit more expansion. So, as I've said in the review section on the left of the next slide, which hopefully we can see. I know Jordan's just like in the background clicking everything all the time. So everybody should be like applauding Jordan at the end of this because he's done a great job. So yes, the review section. Good opening and closing sentences. It builds intrigue and curiosity. But I don't feel like there's enough detail about the war. I need to know which sides are involved. Who are the spies? Are they known to one another before they've been dispatched? Like, are they colleagues? Have they worked together before, or are they individuals that have come together like an Avengers style team? What is this lab? Is it significant, and how did they get lost? I feel like these things could help with the intrigue and the hook. And then finally, we know where the spies are from, but where are the spies being sent to? I feel like that's kind of crucial. So suggestions on the right side, keep the opening and closing sentences. I feel like they do a great job. Expand on the war and which sides are involved. Elaborate on the spies and who they are, whether they're longtime friends or fresh acquaintances or what. Have they worked together before? I don't know. Explain the lab, maybe, its significance and how they become lost and trapped. Or is it insignificant? Does it need to be mentioned? And then tell the reader where the spies are being sent to. This may help accomplish the suggestion above on the expansion of the war. So really, it's just the middle section. It just needs a bit more work. Expand on key details. Let us know more about the characters themselves, like who the spies themselves are, and what are they opposing on the other side of the war. That's pretty much all I've got for that. I love the texture and the scratching on the main background, and I love the gradient of the blue fading into the darker, shadowy sort of vibe. But I'm curious as to the significance of the dagger, because obviously this book is called The Seeker. What's the dagger about? This isn't touched on in the blurb at all. Is it relevant? And how important is it? Maybe that needs to be put into the blurb, or maybe we need to rethink what the main sort of subject matter of the cover art is. The hood border element around it gives sort of a vibe of sci-fi stuff, and I don't know if that's what you're going for. I'm assuming so. It's definitely what I would do in mine, and I don't know if anybody's seen my very limited social posts, but that's a sort of similar vibe to what I've got in my dystopian sci-fi type thing, which is cool. That others are going for it. But it looks more bold to me than the cover text. So perhaps needs to be made a little bit more subtle, because that really stands out more than the text itself. So on the topic of the text, the book title itself is quite strong, but the font and the color choice are not necessarily. So I would again use a bold and tall font for the title, maybe in like a light gray and perhaps with like a soft shadow or a gradient to kind of mimic and match the background there. And that'll really help it to pop and fit better with the other books that are on the shelf in the dystopian genre. And again, the author text at the bottom needs similar treatment. probably better in all caps. And again, use the light gray idea, the gradient, and maybe position it just slightly higher so it reads better at a glance. And again, with I didn't really note that there in the text there, but the book title itself maybe just needs squishing in a little bit so that it doesn't overlap onto the border. But yeah, other than that, I like the main concept. I think there's definitely something to work with there. Just needs a little bit of refining, like the first one. Yeah.
This next one is a dystopian fiction from Colombia called Remnant. So let's jump into the blurb. Ina Verdier, a waitress at her family's cafe, lives with an optimistic spirit in her quiet world of bread and coffee. But when war reaches her doorstep, her gentle outlook is shattered. Despite his old age, her father is called to the front lines, and he chooses to answer the call. Through her tears, Ina listens to the proposal of a mysterious man who offers to save her from his grim fate. In return, she must live in a world of masks, resentment, and masculinity. Her desperate attempt to save her father from the clutches of war will forever change the way she sees people, especially those closest to her. So, I really like this blurb. It does look like a really good story, and I really like the beginning, but the ending could be a bit smoother. So, what bugs me here is this proposal and this mysterious man. I understand that the intent here was to build a little of suspense and curiosity towards his identity in this world, but to understand a little bit better of the themes and what this book is about, we need to understand a little bit more of this world of masks. I don't know if this makes sense to you guys, but it reminded me of Beauty and the Beast with this blurb. Basically, the trope of the strange man, mysterious, and this daughter trying to save her father. And if it is the case, maybe it's a little nice to put these retelling a little bit more, how can I say this? If we could understand a bit more if it's a retelling or not inside this blurb. So the context here is what is missing for me. So expand a little more on the world, what it is about. Is it a academia world? Is it a mafia world? I don't really understand the ambience here and the time period and space. So a little work on that would be very, very good, as well as the link to the fathers and Anna's fate and this man. How can he actually help? What is this proposal? If we could understand it a little bit more, this blur would be perfect for me.
It's basically the same as what Mariana said. It's a little bit confused. To me, it feels like the cover art is a bit disconnected from the blurb itself and doesn't really seem to relate, even though I like the cover art, and I'll get onto that. So yeah, like right there. I like the cover art, but I need to see how it ties in with the story. It gives a vibe of a different time period to that implied in the blurb. So like I'm picturing something a bit more modern day from the blurb, but the cover art itself really feels more sort of like Renaissance era Italy kind of thing, sort of Da Vinci vibes. Um, there's not enough detail about the mysterious man either, and that's already been touched on. So yeah, I need to know how he factors in. Not enough detail about the world of masks. Just what is the time period? What's the setting? I think that is the main key bit that's missing from it. Otherwise, it would have a bit more context. I think if we had that, it would be a little bit less confused, and then maybe we would know if the cover art is related or not. So yeah, just expand on these same things, really. That's kind of it, really. I liked the main idea. I just need more of it. And I think that's the struggle with a lot of people, not wanting to give away too much of the story. And I think that's a dangerous thing that a lot of people can fall into. And I certainly have done when I did my first draft of my blurb. I didn't want to give away too much. I wanted to keep a lot of the spoilers hidden. But in doing so, you kind of lose the essence of what is the story if you try and hide more. So if you go too vague, like some of these submissions, yeah, it doesn't land for the reader. So you need to give something to draw people in and be an effective hook. Yeah. Okay, so this one is a science fiction story starring the members of the agency that gives the series its name. A series about broken people trying to heal their wounds by saving the innocent is the best way to describe this story. We know everything through the eyes of Gaspar, a human accompanied by his subconscious, which is manifested through hallucinations, who, after being disconnected from his universe of origin, finds a purpose in life working in the Omniversal KET Protection Agency. So, for me, this has a little bit of intrigue, it has a little bit of a hook, but it's a bit too explanatory for the starting sentence saying that it's the members of the agency that gives the series its name. I feel like that can be completely reworked, and maybe we can give a couple of character names to immediately be relatable to a reader, because you've got the name at the end, which I presume would also be on any sort of cover art or title art or whatever. So I feel like uh, maybe we need a bit more of the story, a little bit more on what the story is actually about. Um, like how are these people broken? How are they trying to heal their wounds by saving the innocent? Um, need to maybe expand just a touch more on that. Um, and how is the subconscious manifested through hallucinations? Um, and yeah, the cover art is irrelevant to a series necessarily, and it just sort of gives the vibe, doesn't it? But yeah, uh, the first sentence references a title, but I don't see any title in the art itself. So maybe that's something to think of for any like title cards or anything for the series, is to make sure that there is actually a title there rather than just artwork. So yeah, I would again just expand a bit more on details. That's mostly my feedback on that one.
Yes, my feedback is very similar. I think it's a bit hard if you start a blurb with talking about its series name and we don't have the name. It's a little unnecessary to explain it inside the blurb. You can just jump into the story and the plot straight on. So it feels a little too impersonal for me. So it sounds like a conversation. So what is your book about? And you try to explain it to me, but it doesn't feel like a blurb. So something you put on a book cover, so readers who don't know you uh, want to read it at bookstores or sites, etc. So that's my main problem with this blurb. It does have a very interesting plotline and intrigue here towards the ending that could be explored and expanded. So the Casper, this human with a active subconscious, these hallucinations, I would like to know more about this. And the last thing I want to tell here is that how a reader describes a book is very subjective, very personal. So when you say something like a series about broken people trying to heal their wounds by saving the innocent is the best way to describe this story, maybe you can rephrase this, maybe you can just cut the last part of the sentence because you can't tell readers how to feel and how to describe your story. That's not really the role and the function of the blurb. You have to intrigue them enough so they can jump to a conclusion by themselves. So stick to the plot line and give in a little bit of context here with Casper and his work and what is this Omniversal Cat Protection Agency. This is what I wanted to see in this blurb.
I think we just need a bit more on Gaspar and the KT Protection Agency. We need, we need to know, like I said before, and like you just touched on, how they're trying to heal these wounds by saving the innocent. We need a bit more detail on that rather than description, rather than explanation. And I think you're right. That will definitely help draw people in because it is a really intriguing concept.
The next one is a synopsis from Emanuela from Romania. She's working on a romance novel. She's currently at chapter 2, and she's submitted a synopsis. Mariana, do you you have some recommendations?
So let's talk a little bit of Emanuela's synopsis. I think this is the first synopsis we'll have here. I really, really like this. I think it could be a little bit smaller. It's a little too long for a synopsis, for could be a little summarized, for example, in the resentment points and some part of your synopsis after the Clarice and Daniel, I think, Daniel meet and start living together. The resentment grows, and I like the fact that I can feel the resentment growing even in the synopsis, which is something very hard to do. You left me intrigued from beginning to ending throughout this whole text, which is really, really good, a really good sign. But the resentment points we could summarize a little bit. The church part, for example, it could be a little smaller, but that's about it. All the plot points are here. All the main the main points are all here. I can understand Clarice's personality as well as Daniel's, its motives, its goals, but I really do uh, need to understand more of where and when it takes place. It's a romance, but we cannot place it exactly on a timestamp and a place stamp, which helps understand the atmosphere, the themes, and the whole story defines by its time period. So we need to understand a little bit better of that. It doesn't need to be long. It could be just one sentence, for example, in the beginning. But it's a very well constructed synopsis. So congratulations.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for taking us through it. And it's so unfortunate that we don't have time to go a lot more in depth for this. I'm not sure. Will, do you have anything to add to what Mariana already highlighted about this synopsis?
No, I'm mostly in agreement with that. Yeah, it could do with being a bit shorter and a bit more refined. There's a bit of confusion I find with some of the characters. I think it's more the way that the synopsis was structured rather than the story itself and rather than the characters themselves. I think it just needs a bit of reworking so that we're not sort of. It doesn't feel like it's head hopping, but we're almost flip flopping between what this character's doing, what this character's doing, quite a lot there. So I would just maybe refine that, but I'm very intrigued with the idea of it. Um, yeah, and the cover art is intriguing as well.
Then we move to the next one, which is from Scarlett Elizabeth from the United Kingdom. She's writing and working on a historical mystery, and she's currently already at the third draft. And that's something we could really tell as well from her her synopsis that she submitted was really in depth. But maybe Mariana, you can maybe you can pick up, and Will can jump in again with some remarks.
So, about Scarlett's synopsis. I really liked the synopsis as well. I think it's a bit well structured, but it does get a little confusing at times and sets up a little too many questions for me. But for example, what is Violet's and Lucy's relationship? Are they blood related? Why were they stuck together? Why did Violet's age was highlighted and Lucy's not? Are they the same? Why would she suspect the grandfather, for example? And why did the police not suspect him? And is the resurrection, which appears towards the end of the synopsis, this supernatural part of the story, a theme since the beginning, or is just a angle present on the resolution? So that are some of the questions I would like to have answered in the synopsis, because it's too open for me to understand the narrative. It's blurred a little bit of the story for me because of that, but it has clear plot points and sets up a nice atmosphere and the themes. I can understand your writing style, and I can see the personalities of the characters, which is very good, but can be a little more refined in how you present these plot points and how you l- lead us through your story.
Little confusion again with some of the characters, and more the relationships between them, the dynamics really that might need some refinement. Again, very intrigued by the idea of the story itself. I think it's it's definitely a page turner, um, so that's definitely got it going for it. Not something that I would personally read typically, but having read the synopsis, I am very much intrigued, and that was kind of how I felt about my wife's book, which I can't stop talking about. I'm pointing that way because she's off screen that way. Um, but yeah, I very much felt like that about my wife's book. Was at the first time I read the synopsis was it's not my kind of thing typically, but I'm very much intrigued. So uh, when a book can do that, or when a synopsis can do that, you know you're onto something. Because if it's not someone's vibe, but they're actually interested, all of a sudden, you know you've got something decent. Um, so yeah, I think it's more just about defining the relationships and the dynamics between the characters, and whether or not the um, what's her name, Violet's age is necessary. Uh, if you're not defining the age of the others, or if it's relevant or not. And yeah, I think again mostly it's just about refining it and restructuring some of the sentences. But other than that, I think you're onto something.
All right. And then we go to the last synopsis we got, which is from Kana from the Philippines, which is a psychological horror, and it's already done. And Mariana, I saw that you have some feedback as well.
So, moving to our last synopsis, this one was a really good text as well. I really enjoyed this one. Sounds like a great story and exactly the ones I would like to read. Some things I want to point out. These phase topics aren't really necessary. The synopsis can be written, it can be and should be written in running text. So, those topics aren't necessary. So some of the things I think could be summarized, and some of the things aren't really necessary here. Is too detailed to function inside a synopsis. We need to see only the main points. So, for example, the name of the Latin text here and the exact time of his death, those things are not needed in the synopsis. I understand some authors want to show everything of their book here, but we need to summarize it a little bit so it doesn't uh, exit its actual function. So one last thing about this one is I would like a little more context of the beginning of the book, which here is phase one. So, what is the city's judgment? Why did they actually leave? This beginning, this introduction of the book is a little blurred for me, could have a little worked, but it's a mostly well done synopsis as well.